Hey guys, welcome to Quinian's Budget Crafts. So this took forever, but I'm super happy with the results. A lot of things were fudged, I don't really care, it still came out great. I'm doing that thing where I show you the end product here before, you have to sit through the video to see it. But if you're like Brad Pitt and you want to know what's in the box, you're just going to have to keep watching. So let's start cutting some boards. Hey guys, so a while back you might remember I built that foam box. I was going to build the wooden version. So I did build the box, and I recorded it, and the footage is terrible, and the box isn't so great either. If you look, it's got, gaps, and it's just not very good. But that's okay. We will fix this thing on the belt sander. The only important thing to keep in mind is to countersink your screws. Otherwise, it's a box. It's not that difficult. So let's go ahead and put it on the belt sander and fix up all these bad edges. Okay, so these little side pieces here, they don't have to be absolutely perfect because we're going to edge this with corners. So they don't have to be perfect. They can have gaps. You can fill the gaps if you want. The only thing you want is make sure it's not sticking out too much because that would show through. Like if you use leather or cloth or something, it's going to show through. If you use metal, don't worry about it. It'll be fine. But this little bit here is totally fine with me. I can finish that with a hand sander or a planer or something like that. I'm going to get the rest of these done and then be right back. Alright, that takes care of the sides. Don't worry if you didn't countersink these screws enough, you end up hitting one, the sander will take care of that, even if you're just using a hand sander. The only thing that would be a problem for is if you're using like a plane, the blade would hit that and that would be bad. But for sanders, screw head's totally fine. But with the sides done, now we need to do the top. And here's the thing about the top. It needs to be perfect. I don't really want to say that because I don't really do things perfect most of the time, but the top, it needs to be perfect, at least in terms of this. It needs to be the same height here as it is over here, and here, and here, and you get the idea. So it's got to be square on the top all the way around. So that might take some pretty considerable time. So I'll get started on that, and then probably just jump cut to the end, because that's going to take me a while. Alright, that's better. It is definitely still rough, that's fine. Looks like I put these screws a little too close to the top. May end up taking these out and then moving them down a little, if I even need them for, I don't know, I might. But this will be covered in leather, so don't care about the screw heads. This on top though, you probably would see, unless I put leather up here, which I might actually to hide some of the crimes here. But I think that'll probably do it for the belt sander. So let's go ahead and get out the hand sander, smooth this all out. This is just a 100 grit sheet that I tore up into 4 pieces to fit on this thing. And here we go. It's definitely smoother. I don't know about the level. I think it's got like a little dip here. I might actually worry about making that perfect once I make the lid so that this matches the lid. So if they're both off, then whatever, as long as they're off together. Let's just go ahead and do the sides. And the bottom. bottom also doesn't have to be absolutely perfect because we're going to wrap leather covering these screw holes over the side, and we'll put felt on this so leather goes over the felt and you won't see the bottom anyway. The only thing it does need is it needs to be flat so it doesn't wobble when it's sitting on the table. This thing I'm working on is not flat, but it seems pretty sturdy. Find out later. I think that'll probably do it for the sanding on this thing. So let's go ahead and cut the smaller boards down for these things that fit inside here. First thing we're going to do is measure the boards. These boards, by the way, are this. I don't know if the camera's focusing or not. Can't really see it. That is a poplar 25 inch by 3.5 inch by 45 inch. So anyway, we're going to measure these boards off of this box itself instead of with a tape measure so that the boards actually fit in the box, not some arbitrary measurement I make. That probably doesn't line up because I can't measure. Alright, so this is the top and bottom of the box for this side. This will also be the back and front, actually. Have the sideboards on the inside of all the rest of the stuff. And for cutting those boards, we're going to use this ancient beast right here. Just double check that this fits in the box like I want it to. Perfect. That's exactly what we want. Okay, real quick, I already messed up. So these ones are not supposed to be the full width front to back like this because this thing goes in here and it's not going to fit if those are there. So let's make this one and then we'll trim these down to fit this. Alright, those fit right. If there's a little bit of wiggle room, that's fine because I want to line the inside of this with felt. Original one, only 2 inches of that. Seems about right. Alright, now we got these little things that can go on like so with the, where to go? This on top of it. That's the wrong one. Or actually, this is the right one, that's the wrong one. You get the idea. Anyway, so that's the sides. And front for this one. This one also needs a bottom and a top. I don't think I have enough poplar here actually. That's okay, I can get more later, but for now let's go ahead and finish the cuts with the stuff I've got. So I know that I have one of these, one of these, one of these, taking up room, and it takes up that much room right there. So just trim this off and the other 4 to match it, the other 3 I guess. Now I have these cutoffs I can use for the side pieces of that. Alright, so this is the front and back of these side boxes. And we'll see about this. Is that this way. This might actually be a good length from front to back. Let me find out what the original was. Original was that. And it's not quite as deep. I might want to cut this one down and this one to make it a little deeper. Because originally it was 4 inches from front to back. So still though, let's grab this and measure off of this just to be sure of what sizes I'm working with here. So this is the front. If this were the side, right orientation? No, there we go. And then this where the front puts it right there. It's a pretty big gap between them. We don't have a lot of room, so I think I'll probably go ahead and see if I can make those a little longer. You know what the heck that is. Well, that goes to this, I believe. Yeah, there. So the original was 4 inches. I kind of like that idea. It's got 12 inches on the inside, minus the, what is that, 1/4 inch, 1/2 inch combined in the front and back. And we need 4 of those total. Stack that up. Push it over just a bit. And cut all 4 of them at once. Make sure that they're all the same. There we go, there's our side pieces. For the other 2 boxes, the only thing I have to worry about is the floor and the lid for each of them, all 3 boxes. About the only bit of poplar I got left is this one and these offcuts. So I'm not sure if I want to tile them and just glue them together. I mean, that could work. Or if I wanted to try and get more poplar first, or I don't know. But for now, what I do know is that I want to glue the 4 walls together nice and square on the crafting mat where I know it's actually flat, because this mess ain't flat. And we'll make lids and stuff after that, I think. So, to the crafting mat.
Okay, so while that prints over there, let's discuss these little boxes real quick. So you can butt the edges up against each other just like that. That's totally fine, nothing wrong with that. You could cut some finger joints into it, which are just square little tabs that go together like fingers, like that. Those look fine. They look a little industrial to me, so I don't like that. You could also cut dovetails into these, which is definitely going the extra step. That's a bit more effort than I really want to do. Or you can just trim these off at 45 degrees so that they mesh up against each other real nice like a picture frame. So there's a couple ways you can do that. You can cut it with a scroll saw or a bandsaw, or I don't know, probably use a miter box, something like that. What I'm going to do though is I have a couple of 45 degree angle doohickeys that I put holes into and printed out some little half rods to hold them together. I can slide them up and down this thing to change the spacing. So what you can do, take a piece of sandpaper, 100 grit sandpaper, and then you just put your little blocks on there, and your piece of wood. You can get the edge, pretty good to start with, and then just use this as your guide. Just hold it there so it stays, and it'll just make that 45 degrees for you. That's a whole lot of work to do it that way. So what I think I'm going to do is a combination of this. I'm going to put these things on the edge of my belt sander like that, and then just run the board straight down into the sander, because it's the same idea, just a whole lot faster. Hi, kitty. So I'm gonna go take care of these in the belt sander off camera, but you know how that works. So I will be right back with these things all trimmed down, and hopefully the thing over there printed out, and then we can get these glued together. Alright, got all my parts here cut out and beveled off with the 45 degree jig here. It didn't work out exactly perfect. These aren't quite 45 degrees, but that'll be alright. We'll fill that in. So first though, we're going to use this thing. It's pretty cool. I'm going to put a link to it down below if you guys want one. It just holds your stuff at 90 degrees or 45, you get the idea. Anyway, So we use some wood glue. I'm going to use super glue wood glue because it's pretty quick. It'll be set in about 5 minutes, and I can switch to another corner since I only have one of these. So, before we do that though, we need to clean all the sawdust off of these. We're going to use some alcohol. And the reason for using the alcohol is it dries super fast. So now, we'll just take some wood glue here. Don't need a whole ton because we do have gaps and we're going to fill those in. So just put a little bit. Go ahead and take your pieces and smear the glue together. Set them in the thing. Probably should have adjusted this screw before I put them in here, but anyway, get your pieces set in here properly. And then you screw down the thing, and it will hold them at 45 degrees. Unfortunately, it doesn't seem to work very well if the thing is very tall like this. You see, I got it splitting at the top. So you might just throw a rubber band or a clamp or something on that. But there you go, that's all you gotta do, and give it 5 minutes for the super glue stuff to set up, and then you can switch to the next corner. And so we do have a bit of a gap in here. It's not too bad though, and what we're gonna do is we collect a bunch of this sawdust, and we'll just mix that with some glue and stuff it in the gap. It'll be fine. You're not going to see this inside piece anyway because it's going to be felt line. Alright, so this next step is completely optional. You don't have to do this. You don't even need these tools. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to carve these things out, and I'm going to use a template like so. You could use like a regular stencil and just draw it in, or freehand it, or draw it on with a pen, whatever you want to do. I'm going to use this just because I'm used to for doing leather stuff. And the idea is to get something kind of like this. So you can do this two ways, really. You can use a Dremel if you want to do that. If you're going to use a Dremel, I suggest something very lightweight that's easy to control. And there are 3 types of burrs I would recommend. There's this one, which is like a little ball burr, this spiky one, and this one that's not quite as spiky. You can do most of it with this though. Or, if you do want to use carving tools, the only thing you're really going to have is you do need some sort of big heavy blade to cut your borders in, and you need either an X-Acto knife or one of these that has a bevel on only one side. That way you can get around your details there to break the grains in the wood, so when you go across it doesn't like splinter out everywhere. And you need a V-gouge. So what you're going to do, if you're doing it my way, is you're going to glue this template on. You'll use either an X-Acto or the bevel to cut around your detail, and you gouge it out with this thing, or you can use the Dremel. I use both. And you use the box cutter with a ruler to cut your if you can see this or not, the little ridge right there, just so you have like a border. Alternately, if you wanted to do it a different way, you didn't want this raised, you wanted the pattern set in, which I think is a relief cut, is you cut out all of the printed section. Whatever you prefer, it doesn't really matter. As far as these templates, you can get these all over the internet. Tanity's Leather has a bunch of free ones. You can do the one that's more consistent braid. I just like the broken braid. I think it looks better. And that's another thing too with this. I don't know if you can see it or not, but there's a bunch of tool marks left in there. I actually like the tool marks. I think they look pretty good. But to each their own. Do it however you prefer. What I'm going to do is I'm going to glue this on, and then I'll cut it out with this thing, or cut around the details. And I'll probably use the Dremel to remove the bulk of the white bit on the paper here, and then use the gouge to clean it up a little bit. So I think I'll just probably time lapse that because it's very long. This one piece took me the better part of a day. That's the other thing too. The reason it took so long. However deep you think you need to carve it, like quadruple that. You need to go real deep. So when you sand the paper and stuff off, you don't lose all your detail. So yeah, all right. Enjoy the time lapse or completely skip it if you don't care about this part. So I'm going to interrupt the time lapse real quick here to show you guys something. I don't know if you can hear it on this microphone. I'll get it really close to see if you can. But when you're cutting through this, you can feel these the grain lines. Like the knife will actually lift up, and you can hear it pop a little bit too. So that's mainly what you want to do. You want to cut through those things. So let's see if we can hear this. You hear it popping when the knife lifts. So yeah, that's what you're looking for. If you get a little sloppy, it's fine. I also ended up abandoning that wooden handle one because it's just not comfortable and it really hurts my hand. So yeah, you can see my hand shaking now. So right there, it's fine. But then right here, it snags and lifts up because that's where the grain line is. So you want to make sure you sever that. And that's what you're trying to watch out for. Of course, if at all possible, you'd want to try and orient your wood to where you're actually working on this side of it and not this grain side. I may end up actually recutting these just because of that, but I don't know, we'll see. Anyway, back to the time lapse. Okay, now you got two methods you can proceed with. You can Dremel it, or you can use like a little V-gouge or something. If you are going to Dremel it, use a super light handheld, cordless, whatever, so it's not like pulling on you while you're trying to, because it's a pretty fine area in here. So I literally do not have a tool small enough to get into this tiny little detail, which is why my original one came out a little chunkier than what's drawn here, but that's totally fine. So we'll just go ahead and hog out a lot of this with the Dremel, if not all of it, and then go back in with this one and then try and clean it up a little if it needs it. I just gotta remember to go deep enough, because in that first one I didn't, and I had to keep going back and it took a long time. So let's go deep enough to start with and not have to worry about it. So let's time lapse this one too. So I forgot to turn my microphone on, but whatever. Anyway, now we've got all 4 of these carved out. So I'm just going to glue them together with the little jig there to, make them nice and square. And for the lid on this thing, I'm going to use some more poplar. Went to the store and got some more. I'm just going to cut this board and glue the 2 boards together and then trace around it for the actual lid portion, because I didn't get a piece big enough to span this thing. So the jig wasn't working because the boards are too long. They kept tilting and it wouldn't glue the tops correctly. Plus I realized that my box probably isn't actually square. So what I did is I put the framework for the lid on top of the box with some wax paper so I didn't accidentally glue them together, and then clamped it with some flat boards to make sure that they're exactly where they're supposed to be, and glue it together that way. That way, even if the box is, or the lid's a little off, it's not quite square, at least it will be square to the box. So, I mean, if you have table saws and stills, you probably won't have to do this, but if you're like me and stuff's not square, this is how you can make sure it is square to itself, at least. For the boards for the lid, all I did is take a really rough rasp and scratch the edges so that the glue has something to hold on to, and then just glue them together, butted up against each other. You don't need to worry about like pegs or biscuit joints or any of that kind of thing, because they're going to be inside the framework that we glued up a second ago, so they're not going anywhere. Plus they're going to have felt on them, that'll glue it together. Yeah, it'll be plenty of glue, don't worry about it. Just scratch up the edges and stick them together. For tracing out the part I want to cut out for the lid, I just found the center of the 2 sides there and then lined those up with the joint between those 2 boards, and then traced around it to know where I'm going to cut. So for designs to put into the lid, there's a bazillion and one options. This particular stencil I got off of Thingiverse. I'll drop a link below. The one off to the side there, the little vines, that's also from Thingiverse, but I know for a fact that Tandy's has that one on their website if you wanted a paper version of it. But anyway, just whatever stencil you're going to use, unless you're a really good artist and you can freehand it, just make sure you measure everything. Make sure it is completely 100% perfect. And then you can trace it out. The spacing in the little frilly one was really too narrow to get the pin in there on most of it, so I went through and corrected that a little bit. And I really didn't like the way it ended because it like they didn't touch. It was really weird. So I just kind of continued their lines around in a natural flowing motion to make them connect. I end up adjusting the top and the bottom to connect as well later, but that's what we got for right now. So now we can go ahead and start carving this out. I'm gonna do the same thing I did before and just use the Dremel. That's easier. So on this bigger one, I wanted a little bit different of a thing going on. So I want the tree to be the part you see like on the sides, this part standing up, and the area around it carved in. But I didn't want to carve the entire lid. That's just ridiculous. So I took, I think it's a spoon gouge, I'm not sure, the curved one, and just took little chunks out of it all the way around in a circle. That will define the border for where I'm actually carving in. That way I don't have to do the whole entire lid. So at some point I had to switch out to this little dentist Dremel thing, but I don't like it because the tip squishes in when you're trying to push on it. So I ended up switching to the bigger one here. I really wish I had had that to start with. I don't know what I was thinking. It's a very heavy, but it's adjustable speed and all that good stuff. If I had the wand for it, that would be perfect, but I broke that thing a long time ago. But yeah, using the big one set to a fairly high speed, it will just chew right through this. At some point while carving out the bigger one, I realized that I didn't like the way the lines connected on the top and bottom, so I just drew it in with a pencil and then took care of it real quick with a Dremel. But there you go, there's the top and bottom. Now that I've done all the details, I decided not to do those weird little star thingies. I can go through with the larger tools and just take out large chunks of material. The hammer I'm using has rubber on one side and plastic on the other. You can use the rubber side for lighter taps where you don't need a whole lot of force behind it, and a plastic one for harder taps. But do not use a metal hammer on your wooden handled tools or you will splinter the wood real fast. Alright, now that the carving is all done, we'll go ahead and cut out along this line very carefully. On the smaller boxes, I was originally in the foam one going to have this flappy lid here, but that's going to look terrible. So then anyway, what we're going to do instead is we're going to put the lid inside the edge here, and then we'll cut it off across just like an inch or so down. Then the whole thing will open up. I'm sure you've seen that before on woodworking channels where the guy actually knows what he's doing. But I'll just go ahead and get those cuts done, and I'll be right back. So with these lids, because I built the frame and then cut the panel to go into the lid, which I think is actually backwards, I cut them a little generous so that I could sand it off until it fit about as perfect as I can get it. So just if you're using that method, just go ahead and just keep sanding and press fitting until it works. Once you're pretty confident it's going to fit properly with just a few taps, you can go ahead and put a little bit of wood glue on there, and then use the rubber portion of your hammer to go ahead and tap it into place. Alright, so to figure out where you want to cut for your lid, use at least one piece of material that's as thick as the board that you're capping the thing with, and then add to that for however much space you want between the top of the inside of the lid and then the bottom of the rim. I don't know if I'm using the right terms there. Hopefully I'm not confusing you. But anyway, I'm going to use 2 board thicknesses away from the inside of the lid for the lip on the edge there. So I'm stacking up 3 pieces of the lid material and make a little mark there, and then I'll know where to cut all the way around. So if you've ever seen anybody do these before, they just run it through the table saw, quick little zip, and they got a lid. I don't have one of those. Ryan, send me a table saw. Okay, thanks. Anyway, what I'm going to do, because I don't have a table saw, is I'm going to very, very carefully cut these with the dovetail saw. It's going to take forever, so I'll be right back. So after getting all of the boxes and the lids sanded and matched so that they actually close properly, because my cuts of course weren't straight, so I had to go out to the belt sander and fix that. Time to start putting on some hinges. So for the hinges, I have this box of these little antique looking hinges. You can get them from Amazon for next to nothing. And it's measured out and marked where the hinge is going to sit on my lid here. And then take, in my case I'm using like a chisel type carving tool, you can use a knife or whatever, and just pop out a little piece of wood right where the hinge is going to sit. Doesn't have to be crazy deep, you only need it deep enough for the hinge to sit nice and flush with the surrounding wood. There you go, just like that. For mounting the hinges, you are going to want to pre-drill your holes for the screws or nails, whichever you're using, to go into. If you don't, you are definitely going to split at least this wood if you're using poplar. I don't know about other woods, but this will for sure split. So go ahead and pre-drill your holes. And then either screw the screws in by hand, or if you are going to use an electric whatever, don't use a drill unless you've got adjustable torque. You can turn it way, way, way down. Or use one of those really cheap electric screwdrivers, because they really don't have any torque and it will stop on its own way before it actually splits anything. So if your screw heads are taking up space, the lid may not close all the way, you might do this Cookie Monster thing. That is actually a good thing, because most latches use tension to stay closed, so if the lid's trying to open a little bit on its own, that is actually pretty helpful. But for the next part here, we're going to sand these now that the lids are on, so we can get them all, matching up, just in case something was off by a little bit. So a little bit of double-sided tape on the edge here, and that'll make it stay closed well enough to sand it at least. Of course, you don't have to have a little palm sander, you can do this by hand, but I've got it, so I'm going to use it for sure. Go ahead and get everything sanded down nice and flush, make sure it all matches. If you wanted to round any corners, now would be the time to do that. Don't forget to sand your lid as well, and if you did do a carving in your lid, this is pretty much your last chance to do any little touch-ups that you might need. You can do that after you stain it, but you're gonna have an uneven stain if you mess with it after it's been stained. So any final changes or anything you want to do them now. So I went through my box of hinges and found these ones I want to use for the main lid. They're nice and sturdy, but they only open up a little bit. If you look at the back of the hinge portion, you can see why. It's got these little bits that hit on the other little bit there. So if you just trim that section off, that should open it all the way. Because I need the lid to be able to open a full 180 degrees so that the longer box in there can open up on top of it. So it's pretty simple. Just Dremel, cutting wheel, and zip right through it. Just make sure you don't actually cut through the hinge in the middle while you're doing that. Putting the large hinges on is a pretty similar procedure. You just mark it out and then cut the slot. There is one catch though. You're gonna have to make these ones really, really deep. Because of the way I need the lid to sit on the thing with the padding and all that stuff, you'll see that later. I need the hinge really, really deep, so I'm doing it the full depth of the entire hinge, not just the one side. When I screwed the hinge on, the screws were sticking out really far. They were sitting up against each other, like to the point that the lid wouldn't close. So I took a step bit and just ran it through the hole to widen it out so that the screw would sit further in the thing. That may or may not be a problem for you, but if you are having issues with the screw heads hitting each other, then yeah, just using a step bit to clear that out some will solve the problem there. But also, I ended up with a little bit of a uneven mismatch thing going on there. So I take my super rough rasp, where you can use that thing as like a cheese grater for wood, and just sort of file that down. Don't worry about making it rough. We can smooth it out with some sandpaper later. And it doesn't have to be actually perfectly flat. You just need it to look like it matches. Once you got that to where it looks pretty good, and it seems like it probably matches, then you can go ahead and sand out the rough marks you made. Then, if you're confident you're done carving and sanding and everything else, go ahead and clean everything off. Vacuum out the boxes, vacuum your work surface, clean everything with alcohol, get it all nice and clean, because the next step is to stain it. For the stain, I'm using the Gel Antique you've seen me use on other stuff before, except this time I'm wiping it off. Whatever brush you use for this is going to absolutely get ruined, so make sure you don't use a good one. And just smear it all over, make sure you jab it into all the carvings, and then wipe it off. If it's not dark enough for you, you want it darker than what you end up with, you can always put more. The goal here is to leave it in the lower spots and wipe it off the high spots. Once the stain is dried, you can go through and seal it however you like. I am using a polyurethane. This one is wipe on. You could use spray on or any sort of clear coat, doesn't really matter. One problem with this wipe on poly is it's really hard to see where you have it and where you don't. I actually ended up messing this up a little in a couple spots, but it's easy to go back and fix. And this step is probably not what the bottle tells you to do, but it's what I've always done when I do like knife handles and things, is I put it on there, wait half an hour to an hour at the most, and then take a clean rag and just scrub it off, just basically like you're buffing it. That way the finish isn't too incredibly shiny. Now it's time to do some liner. You can use whatever you like. I'm using red felt because I really like it. This is the super cheap stuff from Walmart. I definitely don't recommend this kind, but it's what I had, so whatever. I'm using some Elmer spray glue to stick it down with, which also I do not recommend, but that's what I had, so whatever. I would actually recommend using either the already sticky back felt from Amazon. It's a lot thicker felt and it's kind of cushy. It's really nice, a lot easier to work with. And as far as spray glues go, Super 77 is hands down the best stuff I've ever used. But just put it in there and then use a razor blade to trim it off. So after cutting it down with a razor, you're probably going to end up with fuzzy bits on top, which is actually good because you go through with the lighter and you burn that down. And whatever this felt is, it's like a plastic material almost. So it really hardens around the edge where you burned it. And that'll make it a lot more durable right around the edge. So if the edge gets scuffed or scraped or whatever, it's a lot less likely to fray. To attach the interior boxes to the big box, just put them in place. This longer one has an extremely tight fit, too tight actually, but that's all right. Just put them in there. Make sure that the orientation is correct so that when they flip out, the lid is going to be the way you want it to be. Go ahead and mark your hinges, pre-drill the hole, and screw them in. You don't have to worry about carving out a little spot for them or anything like that. Alright, with the boxes in and the felt, it's time to do some leather. So I pretty much do not ever buy whole pieces of leather because they're expensive and you don't need whole pieces. Buy bags of scraps, it is way cheaper, and the bags of scraps usually come with an assortment of different kinds of leather, different colors, and there's usually some pretty decent sized pieces in there. So sorting through my pile here, trying to figure out what exactly I want to use. To some extent, the color doesn't really matter too much because you can just dye leather, but I don't want to. So I'm trying to find something that works with what I've got here. If this were like a really big, like a full floor trunk or something, I'd probably use saddle side as really stiff leather that you can do tooling as things on. But for a box this small, something soft, kind of like one of these straps or something like that will work pretty good. Because of the way the leather is going to wrap around the bottom, I'm going to go ahead and actually put the felt on the bottom first. Here's my practice stencil to see how that was going to work out. One sheet of felt is actually perfect for this. That wasn't planned, that just kind of worked out that way. Kind of went back and forth on what color I wanted to use. Black, green, one of these random ones I have for some reason. Decided you're probably never going to see the bottom really, so black would work out pretty good. All I did was hose down the felt with some more of that spray glue and try to stick it on, and it totally didn't work because that glue is terrible. Sorry Elmer's, but your glue is terrible. At least your spray glue. And now we got to figure out what size strip we're going to need for covering all the way to the edge of the felt and still wrapping around the screw. I'm trying to hide the screws. This strip that was already in the box there, or the bag of leather that I bought, is actually just the perfect size, sort of. That's the size I want in the end. It works around the corners and everything perfectly. But I don't want raw edge showing. I'm going to roll the edges over. So in order to do that, I'm going to have to cut new strips that are this width after the edges have been rolled, if that makes any sense. So when cutting leather, always use a rotary cutter. They don't cost that much. They're really useful on cardboard and like thick cardstock, pretty much anything but foam actually. Works really good on paper. But if you use a knife, you're going to drag and it's going to pull the leather out from under your ruler and you'll get an uneven cut. So if you use the rotary cutter, it just snips right through it, no problem, nice and straight. Once you have figured out what size strips you're going to need, and you cut those out, and we can get ready to fold the edges over. So this tool here is meant for carving lines for when you're sewing leather, so your stitches sit level with the face of the leather. It's not really meant to be used on floppy leather, but I'm using it anyway because I need like a shallow cut to help it fold easier. Not necessary, but it does help, so I'm doing it. And then this tool here is an edge beveler, and what that will do is reduce the amount of material that ends up being folded in, so that when it's folded you don't have like a huge thick edge where it's folded over. I still get it a little bit because this tool is not really meant to be used on floppy leather like this, so it doesn't work very well, but it does work. If you were wondering what it's supposed to look like when you use these tools, here's the grooving tool, and here's the edge beveler. They work a lot better on saddle side, don't work so well on this floppy stuff. And for your leather guys out there, yes, I'm aware of what a skiving tool is. I have one. It works very well on the saddle side, does not work on the floppy stuff. So to roll these edges over and glue them down, I would normally use rubber cement. I'm very, very low to the point of pretty much being out of it. So I'm going to use shoe glue. It's not that great, but it does work. So for putting the shoe glue on here, this stuff is really, really thick. So you got to smear it out pretty hard with like a popsicle stick or something. A brush is not going to work, and I would not recommend using your finger. The thing has warnings on it saying not to get it on you. I don't know if it's actually that harmful or anything, but it is kind of a pain to get sticky stuff off your finger, so yeah, just use the popsicle stick. Once you have gotten that all spread out, you can then fold it over. If you cut that line into it, that'll help you to fold it evenly. If not, just be careful how you fold it and hammer it down. If you guys were watching the live stream from the Dungeoneers thing the past Wednesday, you'll have seen me hammering away. That's what I was doing. I was still trying to fold these things. It's not hard, it's just time consuming. You do actually want to hammer this very, very hard. You want to completely smash the fibers of the leather. Once you're all done hammering away, you should have something that looks kind of like this. Nice rounded over edges. So I had to pull some shenanigans here. I'm going to have 2 layers of leather in here, and I need the lid to be able to close with those layers. So the hinge on the box portion on the bottom needs to sit at an angle. The little trench it's sitting in needs to be as deep as it is, but the bottom hinge needs to be up at an angle, but I don't want a huge gap, that'll look bad. So what I did is cut some more pieces of leather, just big enough to fit into the little slot there, and then I cut it to where when you fold it over, it doesn't quite reach all the way across. That way it's almost like a wedge shape. If I had thought this far ahead and was any good at carpentry, I could have actually cut the slot into it in the shape of a wedge, but you know, past that now. Time to do some things. Figure out where my screw holes are in there for the the screws to go through. Go ahead and pre-punch those. And then before you screw it all the way back down, use your favorite pokey tool to just shove the top portion, to fold it over and shove it up in there. Then you can go ahead and screw it all the way back down, and it should fit pretty good. Now that the lid fits properly and everything's going to work, all the hinges are on and all that good stuff, I will use my precious little remaining rubber cement to go ahead and glue down the leather trim around the inside of the lid here. I went ahead and left the strip a little bit wider than it needs to be, so it's hanging off the outside of the thing. That's fine, because that way I can trim it to fit the box instead of trying to cut the leather to fit a box that's not square, you know what I'm saying. Just put on enough to cover it and trim the excess later. Then I trimmed the corners off at 45 degrees-ish. And cut the next strip of leather to match the last corner I cut off. It doesn't matter if it's exactly 45 as long as it kind of follows that. Once you got all those glued on, you can go ahead and trim off the excess. The best way to do that is to either actually flip it over and use the cutting mat, or put a board on top of it and use it like a cutting board. Just make sure you keep your fingers out of the way. And now to hide the seams on the side here, the screw holes and everything. Just take one of your strips and figure out how long you need it. Go ahead and trim it off there. Put some rubber cement on there, and then you can just put it where it goes. Probably best if you dry fit it first, because you don't want to risk getting the rubber cement on anything you didn't mean for it to be on. Just sort of massage it into place and then go through with your hammer and tap it down. Try to make the edge as flat as you possibly can. Then we can measure out where we want to put our tacks. These are furniture tacks, I think. This is basically very big decorative thumbtacks. They're not actually doing anything for the leather, it just looks nice. And I hold mine with some tweezers so I don't smash my fingers, because I will always smash my fingers. And just continue that all the way around. One thing real quick though is if you come across a place where you try to hammer it in and it bent off because there's a screw under there, not a problem. All you gotta do is snip off the bent part, and then you can put some super glue on the hole that you made and on the peg itself, and then hammer that back in. It might bend over a little bit, but it's fine. It just hooks underneath the leather and it'll stay. It won't come out. Nobody will know that that one is completely fake. The next step is to seal the leather. You can do that with oils, or I think like Tandy sells actual leather seal. I prefer to use wax. Again, there's options there. You can use like beeswax or paraffin or whatever you want. But these cheap little dollar store emergency candles are perfect. All you gotta do is rub the wax into it until the whole thing is turned as white as you want it to be. I mean, however much wax you want on there. And you can either rub this down with your finger or with like a wooden tool handle or something like that to make it melt. Or you can do the cheater method. You just use direct heat. Of course, trying to use a lighter like this, you're going to very quickly run out of lighter fluid, heat up the lighter, give yourself a smiley face. That's no good. What works better is a heat gun. If you have a heat gun or even a hairdryer, actually would work just fine. Just run that over there and keep it moving. You don't want to hold still too long. You might burn something. If you're on one of the thumbtacks or something, you could definitely stay there for a second to melt it off of the tack. Not only does this seal the leather, it puts dark spots on it, which gives you some artificial aging. so you can just go through and add more wax wherever you think it needs some more dark spots, or if you didn't get any wax on there, you can make sure you've got some. But yeah, the waxing or oiling or whatever you prefer, it does age it, make it look pretty cool. But the main purpose though is it seals the leather, so any kind of moisture or whatever is not going to get to it, make it shrink or rot or whatever. And now we can add some furniture. So these little corner cap things, it's the same deal. You buy 50 bazillion of them on Amazon for like $2. They're not very good, I don't think. I mean, they're very soft, and they don't sit very well. But for what I'm doing here, that actually works out pretty well. If you were trying to put these on a box where the corner is like perfectly straight 90 degrees, these would probably irritate you because they're not 90 degrees. They look like they are at first glance, but they're not really. Get what you pay for, I guess. These things are super cheap. Putting them on though is pretty straightforward. All you got to do is put them where you want them, pre-drill the holes, and nail them on. The nails they came with are super tiny, which is good for small jewelry boxes and stuff, but didn't work for here, so I ended up using some longer brass nails. Because I rounded the corner on the lid, I ended up having to use the ball portion of the ball peen here to just sort of tap it into place to wish it to make it fit. And then to make the bottom one match the top one, same idea, just mash it until it fits. So now we need a couple things to hold the boxes closed. I was going to use the little hasps that you can get on cigar boxes, but I only have like 1.5 of them for some reason. So I'll just go ahead and make some medieval snaps. Gonna need some posts, so I'm gonna use some of this mild steel rod. I don't know what size it is, it doesn't really matter, just whatever is gonna work for you. You can use a manual drill if you want, but I've got a drill press, so I'm gonna use that. Of course, if you had a lathe, that would definitely be what you really want to use. I don't have one though, so poverty lathe. Just chuck your piece of metal up into your drill chuck there, and then use a Dremel and spin that with whatever burr or tool or stone or whatever is going to work. What you're trying to make here is like a little dome with a ridge behind it, and then a few more ridges down the length of the rest of the shaft. That way you'll have something for like glue to grab onto if you're going to glue these in. For making those ridges, a hacksaw actually works perfectly. Now that we have our little posts, we can make some straps. Got these little things that are supposed to go on like the corner of a lid of a box or something, little decorative thingies. I've never been able to get them to work for that, but they work really well here actually. So what you want to do is cut out some leather. I'm using that really stiff stuff from my pile. And then put your little corner piece on there, figure out where you want to bend it, use some nice straight flat pliers to get a nice crisp bend. And then you can crimp it around your leather strap there. And then just use some side cutters and trim off the excess leather. You have a pretty cool little pointy strap end thing. For the top portion, we're going to do the exact same thing, except because the top's different. Once we get it bent, we're going to cut it off nice and straight. And whatever this metal is, the soda can or something, pair of scissors will just cut straight through it. You don't need anything special to cut these. And there you go. There's a nice little topper for this thing. Go ahead and poke a hole in it wherever you think you're going to want to have your stud coming through. And then in order to get some spots for the nails to go through to actually mount this thing, we're just going to go ahead and drill the holes. For mounting it to the box lid, totally forget to hit the record button and nail it on.
All I really did was drill it like I did everything else and then just hammer the nails through. So now what you want to do is hold the thing closed, make sure that that strap is pulled tight and that it's straight, and then mark the hole and drill that out for your stud to go into. So I pre-drilled this with a tiny little drill bit, and then I used a larger drill bit with a piece of tape on it so I know not to go too far in. The tape measures how far I can go before I poke through the box. Then use a slightly larger bit literally by hand so I don't make the hole too wide. Then I can just ram the stud in there. I did cut little grooves in the stud so that I could, have something for like epoxy to hold on to. But I ended up making the hole so incredibly tight, I didn't need to. Just hammer the thing in, it's not coming out. If you're worried about it, you can use some like 5-minute epoxy or something, but this will be fine. So there you go. Now you can close it up and snap it closed. Of course, this leather is insanely stiff, so it's going to be really difficult the first 2-3 times. But after that, it'll loosen up and it becomes a lot easier to use. But there we go. Little fancy decorative little strap / medieval snap thing. I did the exact same thing on the front one. I just made the strap wider. For the post, I used this bolt, or not this one exactly, obviously, same one. The hole here is a little bit big. I kind of cut it off center, and that bothers me. But as far as how loose it is and the fact that the lid isn't completely tight, kind of can't be avoided because it has to be able to get over this peg. So there's going to be a little bit of room. You could probably make it tighter, but that's fine. I'm happy with how it turned out. Okay, that took forever, but I think I'm going to call this done. There are a lot of things that were fudged, like these corners and whatnot. And as pointed out in the last section, this is not quite tight, but it's kind of unavoidable because of the way I did it. Future builds, I have a better idea of what I'm doing. This is the first box I've ever done. So let's check out how it works. Got your little thing here, pops off for your main lid. And then inside your main cavity, you got this box, or whichever one you want to use, to hold all of the magic math rocks you could ever want. You can also tip them out into your hand like that if you want to. You got another box here that'll hold minis and stuff, even some larger mount size minis. Those fit just fine. This box here will hold all of your pencils, because somebody's going to forget to bring the pencils, and whatever else is long that you want to put in a longer box. And then the main box, which I'm sure you can see already, has plenty enough room in here to hold your 3 core books, and there's enough room in there to actually get your hand, to one side of the book to get them out of there. Plus, there's a little bit of extra room down there. You could probably fit in, some character sheets or maybe like a supplemental or something. There's about a finger's thickness worth of room under there. And these snaps are not that big a deal. They take getting used to more than anything because they're not like traditional snaps you're used to. But yeah. Also, another thing that was fudged was this box here. It's a little bit too close to this wall, so you got to kind of pull it when you close it. But I mean, it's totally fine. Does exactly what it's supposed to. Even with all the weird quirks about this thing, I am definitely still very happy with this build. I will definitely be using this box. Hopefully, you guys picked up a few things and you can make one yourself if you want. Of course, if you had the appropriate tools, that'd probably make things easier. Totally forgot to put my bag of D6s in here. I keep them separate because I'm a weirdo. But yeah, you can fit, I don't know, I think it's 6 or 7 sets plus a ton of extra D6s. A whole bunch of dice to fit in one of those. Anyway, so if you got the proper tools to do this kind of thing, it would definitely go a lot easier. But even without the extra tools, it works just fine. Also, one more thing real quick. I noticed that there's a space in here, which means I can put other things like my deck here. It goes right in the section. You can fit several things like that if you wanted to. And even though the lid's a little loose, it's not coming off. So there you go. That'll do it for this box. The other box I have in mind that I might do, not anytime soon, because man, that takes a long time,
is a similar box, but I would do it in a steampunk style instead of the carved tree and whatnot. Of course, as always, thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, share, comment, subscribe, and I'll catch you on the next one.